In a recent video, I built a gravel bike from this old Gary Fisher mountain bike. As part of that build, I modified the frame to use thru-axle wheels. I got a lot of questions in the comment section about what all was involved in that modification. So in today's video, I want to take a look in depth at all the changes I had to make to use thru-axle wheels with this frame. If that interests you, stay tuned, we'll get started. There's really three things we have to do to convert this frame to thru axles. The first, we have to bore out the existing quick release dropouts so that the thru axle will fit. The second, we've got to make some adapters that will actually carry and thread the axle. And then the third, we have to weld, braze, or otherwise attach those adapters to the frame. These old mountain bikes use a 135mm rear dropout spacing. Modern thru axle wheels, like the ones I want to use, are 142. So we have to stretch the frame so those axles will fit. It's commonly referred to as cold setting. You only want to do it on steel frames. There's a number of ways to do it. I'm going to use hydraulics. There's two places we want to bend this frame. One is on the chain stays right behind the bottom brackets, and the other is on the seat stays just below the seat stay bridge. What we're going to do is insert a hydraulic ram in between these 2 points and spread them apart ever so slightly. Small changes up here will move the rear dropouts quite a bit. I wanted this to be in a little further, but I don't have anything thin enough. Oop, 152, I overshot a little bit. Perfect. This is the thru axle I'm going to use. It's an M12 with a 1.5 pitch thread. I found a nut that it will screw into. What I'm going to do is bore out the quick release so the axle will fit through, tighten the nut down, and then I'm going to weld the nut onto the frame. And what that'll do is when I insert the axle, the wheel in place and tighten it down, this will pull it together and make it work. These quick release dropouts measure 10 millimeters. And they need to be 12 millimeters to fit the thru axle. So we're going to have to find a way to drill a hole or expand this center point so that a 12 millimeter axle will thread through. So the way I'm going to bore these out, I'm just going to run a drill bit through them. I don't need to be particularly accurate in drilling that hole. It just needs to be large enough that the thru axle will fit through. Once the thru axle is in and I have the nut in place, I will move the nut to get the wheel alignment correct, and then I'll weld it in place.
I don't know if this is a good idea. Yeah, that's not gonna work.
Okay. I knew a twist drill wasn't the right tool for the job. Because of the slot in the dropout, it would have a tendency to grab and bind. I thought maybe I could use an adjustable ream. Set it down to 10 millimeters, put it in the dropout, and then expand it out as the hole got bigger. But it's got the same problem. It would want to grab and bind. I didn't know what the right tool was, and I didn't have it. So what I ended up doing was fitting the drill head to my milling machine, and then just very slowly drilling it through. If I were to do it again, I think I'd buy a 12 millimeter end mill and I'd try plunge milling it. I decided that instead of simply welding the nut to the side of the dropout, that I would machine it, remove some material so it would fit into the dropout. Basically, I would cut out some material, leave a notch, and this notch would fit into the slot in the dropout. Then when the axle is screwed in, it'll be fully supported by that nut. That nut I showed you earlier, it turned out to be way too hard for the kind of machining I wanted to do. So I went to my local hardware store and I found an M12 by 1.5 in a much softer grade. So here's what I made. I took that nut, put it in the mill, and I removed some material. I did one nut that way, and then I did a second nut, but this one I drilled out. So here's how this works. This is the one I drilled out. It fits into the fork, and then this little tang I left fits perfectly in where the original dropouts were. The through axle slides through, and then when this is tightened down, we've got our through axle. So this is what those adapters look like in place. I'm really happy with how they fit and how everything's lined up. You can see that tang I cut out. It fits nicely where the old quick release dropout would be. To hold this in place while I weld it, I'm using some all thread and a spacer. So I've got this set up so that when I tighten this spacer down, it fully clamps these adapters into the dropouts, and then when I weld them, they won't move. So I'm going to strip the paint now off of these dropouts, and I'm going to weld those nuts directly to the frame. This bike uses an integrated derailleur hanger. Because I welded so close to that hanger, it's possible that there was some warpage and caused it to move. I used one of these derailleur hanger alignment tools to check alignment of the derailleur hanger against the back wheel. I then used it to bend the derailleur hanger back into place. The paint on this frame is surprisingly high-end. It uses a candy finish. It's a 3-part paint, so it's a yellow base coat followed by a translucent metallic red, then decals in clear. Because of that, it's going to be incredibly difficult to match the paint. For that same reason, instead of painting the dropouts in the new ISO mount orange, trying to match the finish, I decided to paint them black. The decals on this frame are black and gold, and I decided to carry that paint scheme through the rest of the frame. I'm using automotive grade spray paint for the finish on this frame. This is a 2-part system, so it's a base coat and then a 2K clear. This is just GM black, it's something I had on hand. The clear, this is Spray Max Glamour Clear 2K, so it's a catalyzed paint. You pop a cartridge on the inside, shake it, and it mixes the paint together and then it catalyzes. So here's how these look after paint and then after assembly. I'm really happy with how they turned out. I think they look great. I think they fit the style of the bike. There were several questions in the comment section of my build video. I think the most common question I get is, why would you do this? The simple answer is wheel selection. The bicycle industry for gravel bikes has moved to a thru-axle standard. Finding modern tubeless gravel wheel sets for quick release axles is getting more difficult. By converting this frame over to thru axles, it opens up a whole selection of wheel sets. Another common question I get is, why did I put the axles so they come through on the non-brake side? The bicycle industry tends to put them on the brake side, so they would come in from this side. The reason is, because these are adapted, there's no land on the inside to support the axle when you slide it in place. By having the axle come in on this side, you can put the wheel in, align the rotor into the caliper, and then slide the axle through. If I went the other way, you would have to get the caliper and rotor to line up and the thru axle in all at the same time. This is the easier way to get the wheel put on. And there's plenty of room both at the derailleur and at the front fork here for the axle to come through on the non-brake side. So that's why I did it, and that's why I did it on purpose. Another common question I get is, why did I weld these and not braze them? The answer is really short. I know how to weld, I don't know how to braze. These MIG welds are perfectly fine for this application. There are some things I'll do differently the next time I do this. The biggest one is I'm not going to bother to drill out the dropouts. That was a lot of work, it didn't turn out all that great, and honestly I could have just opened that slot up, slid the axles in, and then welded the adapters anyway. The second one is I won't use the hex nuts as the base for the adapters. Once those were welded in and ground down, there's not much of a face for the axle to ride against. What I'll do next time is I'll just make my own from scratch. So I'll turn down some spools, I'll drill them and tap them. That'll let me make them wider, it will give me more face for the axle to seat against. The last thing I want to talk about, I use a lot of expensive tools in this video that you may not have. Really, the only one that's mandatory is the welder, or if you know how to braze. I think you can make the adapters using hand tools, so maybe a grinder and a file. For the dropouts, instead of drilling those out, I think you can use that same grinder to open those up so the axles will fit. This is the first of 2 videos I'm going to do on the Gary Fisher for clarification. The next one is going to be for the disc brake mounts and how those went into place. If you're interested in that next video, consider subscribing so you know when it hits. So that's it for today's video. Thank you for watching. I'll see you later.